Good morning, everyone. It is very nice, calming intro we have this morning on Friday morning after a very busy week. So I actually really enjoyed that 30 seconds.
Yeah, that was the calmest I think I've been all week. 40 seconds.
It's so lovely to see you both here Friday morning. Welcome to all our viewers, everyone who's watching us live, listening to us on our podcast, or watching the recording afterwards. We're running Friday Live every Friday, 8:30 to 9 a.m. GMT. And we're talking about what's going on for us this week, for our partners, our clients. There's so much happening on a regular basis. We've been doing this for months now. And actually, I use that 30 seconds to reflect on, my goodness me, the things we've talked about over the last few months every Friday. But actually, it's a journey, isn't it? And it's showing us really thinking about what we're doing all the time, just being conscious that things are changing all the time and that we can constantly reevaluate, we can constantly refocus and make sure that we're doing the right things. And keeping that vision and purpose in mind around humanizing work. That's what we really care about. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. I'm very excited this morning to not only have my sidekick buddy Ant with me, but also the wonderful Kirsten Jatho dialing in from South Africa. So I'll ask you to introduce yourself first, Kirsten. Good morning. It's lovely to see you.
Morning, Alex. Morning, Anthony. Nice to be here. And welcome to all the viewers.
Good to have you with us, and good to have you all the way from. Are you whereabouts in South Africa are you at the moment?
I'm actually in Johannesburg, so I'm based in Johannesburg, South Africa, so quite a distance away from you. But it's lovely to be here. Thank you. Luckily, internet connections do these magical things.
Right. It's great to have you with us, and great to hear your perspective from a different part of the world. We were saying just before we joined on that there's probably quite a few similarities, but also quite a few differences happening for you.
Yeah, that's correct. Absolutely, very much so. I think, as we mentioned in the intro, South Africa is still a little bit behind when it comes to psychology in the workplace compared to obviously developed countries, be it the UK, USA, Australia. But we're catching up slowly but surely, and I think the pandemic has definitely sped up things. So topics that many leaders did not want to embrace prior to that, the pandemic has just fast forwarded. So suddenly these topics of empathy and strengths and trust and relationships and all that is becoming very key. And I think a lot of leaders need support on that because it's a totally new territory for them. A working place, which is new. Then it's all the humanitarian things that you need to worry about. Plus, I think there's a lot of strategic realignment in organizations that have to happen. I mean, it's strategies that have got to be revisited, policies, procedures. How do you work all this? I think there's a lot of pressure and as well as responsibility on leaders right now.
Yeah, and I just picking up on that, Kirsten, you're right. In terms of positive psychology, which for many of our viewers will know is at the heart of our whole company and everything we do. But it is a new paradigm in psychology, even though it's 10 years old now. That's new in terms of psychology research, and actually the whole philosophical foundation, focusing on what's right with people rather than trying to fix what's wrong with them, couldn't be more timely than having come through or still coming through a pandemic in the way the globe has. And I remember, actually, I did a video when we locked down in March 2020. And I remember writing the script for it and just to talk to people about there's never been a better time to focus in on our strengths. Everything we've been doing and pioneering around the use of positive psychology couldn't be more appropriate than it is now. And looking back, my goodness, isn't that just right? I mean, we are in a place where people are scared, people are anxious. We're talking about empathy and leadership, we're talking about compassion, but it's so much more than that. It's about finding the unique brilliance in people, what's already brilliant and wonderful about them. We need to reconnect people and bring them back together in teams and in organizations in completely different ways. And our communication channels and everything's changed. It's all topsy-turvy. How can we have those conversations And for me, positive psychology just gives us that baseline, that recorrection almost of where we start from. And if we can start from that philosophical perspective of you're already wonderful, you're already brilliant, let's work out how we can support you to work with us in this direction, or reconfirm what we've forgotten or we don't know about ourselves, rebuild our self-confidence, be happy to talk about what we're good at and use that for the good of our companies, for the good of the planet, for the good of everything that we're doing at the moment. So it does feel quite, I feel quite reflective, just looking back on the progression of those conversations we've had and how important and core positive psychology has been. So even though South Africa might not be, as far ahead as the UK or the USA, there is such a huge movement in this area right the way across the globe. And exactly as you said, we've got a need to accelerate it. Managers and leaders are recognizing that they need that. We're going to need to meet it, that demand, aren't we?
Yeah, and I think what's interesting for me is that the organizations who've been very open-minded and curious and interested in really putting people at the center of their strategy and of their working ethics in their workplace, and the ones that I've worked with over, say, the last year, how they've coped and managed significantly more and differently than the ones who either are hesitant or don't see the need for it. And it's interesting to see that from an outsider's perspective. They just cope much better. Mental health is better. The relationships are better. It's just, for me, that's just so rewarding to see.
I'm curious, Kirsten, from your experience, is there parts of positive psychology, you talked about a little bit before we jumped on, but around emotional intelligence, resilience, and I know that you work on the concepts of flow, and are there parts of positive psychology that people get a lot easier than others in South Africa? Or is it just kind of a different companies, different stages, different people in their different kind of, experiences? I'm curious.
It's an odd question, but you're actually right. Some topics in positive psychology, people just understand a lot faster. So I would say something they naturally understand faster is mental health, because it's obviously a key topic right now. Strengths, people understand that quite quickly. Emotional agility or intelligence and building positive relationships, I think, are easier. Topics where people struggle a little bit more with is the flow concept. I think a lot of people haven't maybe experienced it, so they like, I'm not sure if I've had that in a work context, so they've maybe had it in another context and not in a work environment. Finding meaning and purpose in their work, I think, is something they sometimes have never thought about it. Like, how does my work impact somebody else or somebody else in the world? Or so that, I think, are topics that they struggle a little bit more with. And the whole concept of achieving my potential, like, what does it mean to flourish? Because they all know what it means to function. But what does it actually mean to flourish? And asking yourself, have I ever flourished? And, being curious of what would life be like if I actually do? So that, I think, is also a question a lot of people struggle with.
That's really interesting as like and obviously I'm not wanting you to speak on behalf of an entire continent. I realise where that question may fall down, but it's really interesting, the experiences that you're having going into organizations and going, well, these are the things that are getting people talking. These are the things that people are really curious about. And that question is a really interesting one. We've been doing a lot of work recently about what are like the fundamental things you need to think about when you go to work Monday to Friday or throughout the week. What's maybe one or two questions that you can ask yourself? And I love that one. What would I be like for us if we were to flourish today, this week, together, me independently? I like
that as well. It's really got me thinking. It really got me thinking. I'm sitting there thinking, oh, okay, hang on. When was the last time I flourished? I've never asked myself that question. And what does that mean? Of course, I know the theoretical answer of all the pillars and the perma pieces, but genuinely, if I had to pinpoint a point of which I was flourishing, it would take me a few minutes to start thinking about that, because we talk about all the different components of the PERMA model in terms of positive emotions, engagement, relationships, meaning and accomplishment. And, they're so part of everything we do at Bailey and French. But sometimes we forget almost that we're leading towards something else, and flourishing is very, very important, and an important question. People sometimes, I know that's a bit too flowery a word for some corporate organizations, and they'd rather use the word thrive. It sounds a bit more like strive, doesn't it? So, I'm sure there's an association there. And I think it's fascinating that some language you can use in organizations now that certainly you never could in the beginning of my career. If someone was talking about mindfulness or meditation, they were just a new age hippie. And it was, there was a stereotypical kind of like, oh, okay, you do yoga then, And now, everyone's into it. And I'm the one in the corner when there's doing, a group mindfulness session thinking, I can't focus, I can't do this because I'm not very good at doing it in a group. And it's, I feel the one that's left out. And it's just fascinating, the way things have changed. But that question is a really good one for us and for our viewers here today. Certainly, if anyone's listening and watching, how would you respond to that question? What would life be like for us to flourish? Have you got an example when you were most recently flourishing? We'd love to hear it. I really like that question, Kirsten.
Yeah. The thing that I found powerful about that question when I was thinking about it myself was it's a very future oriented question. What would it be like for us to flourish? If we were flourishing and thriving, what would that look like? How would that resonate with me today, for my team today, for our business today? So even though it's a future focused question, you can still make sense of it right now. And actually, I was already noting down some kind of actions that might take me that one step closer. It was a really kind of interesting kind of question. I guess these are the types of questions and tools when we're being asked a lot at the moment. Can you create a toolkit? Can you create this kind of support guide for leaders? And it's kind of basically leaders, managers, people everywhere are in cognitive overload. If they had to focus on one thing, one or two things, one or two questions with their team this week or every week, and it became a habit, what would it be? What would have the biggest impact? And I think trust is one, but I like the power of that question there around flourishing.
And I think leaders are right now, as I say, in it's really a tough time for them. I mean, they're juggling so many balls. They have to drive productivity and performance and manage their team, and there's a lot of pressure on them. And I think using this question to actually have conversations with the team member to say, what is it like for you to flourish? What does that look like? What does that feel like? What do you need from me? How can I support you? Changes the language and provides totally different support structures than what the traditional business model looks like. And I mean, if my leader would ask me that, what would it like to be to flourish, and how can I support you, and what can we do? I mean, you're really customizing it, if I can call that, to each team member, because they all need different items from you as a leader, and you don't have to sit there and ponder about it. So you're creating straight away a built-in
have we lost? I think signal's dropped.
It's fine. We'll hang on for that question.
I was just going to say, I'm waiting. I was poised, waiting. Oh, you're back.
Sorry, what was the question? Oh, we've lost Kirsty.
She's not back.
Back in a second. But it is really important, isn't it, to think about how we pose questions to our team members to get them thinking. And I think sometimes what I hear is that managers are scared of asking their team members questions like this because they feel like they have to deliver on it. And actually, It's not that at all. It's about opening up a picture that someone can color for themselves. It's like saying, so let's look at it with a new lens. And that in itself is super helpful. But I think leaders really worry that they're then going to be accountable for fulfilling those pieces. And it's, you know, it's the individual accountability that's really, really important, isn't it?
Yeah. 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 Sorry, Kirsten, you're back.
So I think it's, you know, bringing in that vulnerability in relationships as well, to say, you know what, let's meet each other together to achieve something. We obviously have to be productive and reach targets and do the objectives. So that's not negotiable. But like, how can I make sure you get fulfillment and joy in your work? Like, what is it going to take for you to get up in the morning, jump out of bed and go, whoa, I'm coming to work? Instead of thinking, oh, not Monday again, and when's Friday coming? I mean, that's terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was a really interesting, I was listening to a podcast this morning, and Marcus Buckingham, as we know, does some really cool things, but he was on talking, I think it was the Entree Leadership podcast, if anyone's listened to that before. He was saying, actually, you don't need to spend every day all day. You just need to find 20% of time. And the research kind of backs that up. You don't need to flourish all the time. You don't need to thrive all the time, but you do need to maybe do some reflection to make sure that it's 20% of the time, and make some changes if it's not. And apparently if it falls below that, even 18% of the time, it has really significant impacts on mental health, on resilience, on our ability to bounce forward. And yeah, I found that quite interesting. So even just taking that moment with your manager or with your team, we put sometimes too much emphasis on the manager, right? Why not have this conversation with a team member as well? Yeah,
absolutely. I think that's really interesting, because what you're saying there about we don't have to do this all the time, and the impacts are long lasting, and they really are, and it can be really exhausting too. So I think sometimes there's like a mindset of like, we see work generally as tiring, and like our downtime and our recovery needs to be like something else outside, finishing work early, going to the park, doing a mindfulness session, doing something that you enjoy physically. Whereas actually you can find flourishing moments in the work and recovery moments in the work too. And that can also bring a sense of calm if you've got a workload that's going up and down all the time. And I find that really interesting, like that actually the new kind of ways of working, people working from home more and from different locations, allows you and affords you the ability to actually think to yourself, what would be calming for me on a day after a really crazy day? Would it be better for me to be in the office and get the energy from everyone else and feel comfortable to just be part of what's going on? Or do I really need to be at home, away from any distractions, without any noise, because I'm full? And I think sometimes we don't think about it enough in that way of like, what's recovery work? Not just recovery from work, but what's recovery work from times when we've been full on, flourishing, thriving, top of our game. I mean, I remember I've been thinking on that question. The times I've been top of my game have been when I'm fully using my strength out there. Gosh, it's tiring. It's flow, right? When you're in flow, it's brilliant. The feelings are great afterwards. We know the impacts on performance and well-being, and even our physical well-being is so strong. But I do get tired after moments of flow. I need to just shut off. And actually, I need to not talk to people. Talking is one of the things that I enjoy it a lot, but it exhausts me too.
Yeah, I love that. And I mean, I don't know if you've seen the Lure and Schwartz quadrants, you know, with are you in performance, recovery, you know, distress and that. And I think a lot of people are just in performance. That's what you're saying. They just work, and eventually they burn out. And then to move back to recovery or performance is quite exhausting. Sometimes you can do it on your own, and sometimes you need support from others. And we should maybe learn to go performance and then recover during a day. You know, like I need to focus here for 2 hours, and I flourish and I thrive on this, and then let me just regroup and pull back a little bit and get my energy differently. And we often don't do that. We just do 8 hours of performance. It's like running a marathon. No wonder we're exhausted.
Yeah, this is actually one of the things that really got me into positive psychology and really wanting to make a difference and use these tools and these techniques within organizations, because what we've just touched on there is recovery time is kind of that thing that you do when you go home or you leave work. And I want to thrive in those times. That's the time I see my family and my friends and, have an impact on my community and, maybe watch my sister play football or lead a football team or go and play sport and have an impact on other people's lives outside of my work. That's the time I equally want to thrive. I don't just want to thrive when I'm at work. So therefore, by definition, you can't use that time just to be in that recovery state. You have to find recovery and times of flourishing while you're throughout your day. You can't necessarily separate the two. It's a really important piece of why I do what I do and why I think humanizing the world of work is so important.
It is, and the impacts are massive, aren't they? Yeah.
And I think, I can't speak for the UK now, but an interesting, I think, cultural trend that is in South Africa, which is not very positive, is that people do not take lunch breaks. They either work through their lunch breaks or they eat at their desk for lunch breaks. So they feel guilty to actually take that 20 minutes, half an hour of just going down, like you say, recovering, recouping, finding that energy. And it's a habit that's crept into this culture in our country, which is not very positive. And, we know that people actually take that time out for half an hour to eat and just relax and absorb some sun or go for a walk. They come back and they can perform and come back and are made more positive and not so grumpy and can achieve more. So it's an interesting observation that is something that is a dysfunction, I would say, in South African working culture.
It's not just South Africa. So it's really interesting, actually. And I've really kind of challenged myself because I recognized something when you were talking in me that's really important as a leader, is that the pressure when there's so much important work on to be looking like you are pulling your weight, that you are there and you are absolutely with the team and we're all doing this and it's so important, is really critical. And, leadership behavior in those circumstances, particularly when the pressure's on, is really, really high. And I'll be vulnerable and share my experience as a leader. We had a time when we had several people who were chose to play some games on the dining room table in our office on their lunch break, at a point in time when we had some really big critical pieces of work that were urgent and important and really we were up against it. And it felt like there was almost like two groups in the office. There was like the group in the office who were really working hard to get these pieces over the line for the business, and the other group that were like really caring for themselves and really looking after their joy and their play. And it wasn't right. It didn't fit. And I remember at the time thinking, I can't celebrate this. I can't say to them, oh, well done, guys, for sitting down and playing a game whilst I'm working super hard and really struggling. I couldn't say it. And yet, I think it came to a head almost that actually it was just so difficult for people who were genuinely really challenged to see that happening in front of them, that there was a conversation that was like, if you want to go for a walk, go for a walk. Like if you want to go out for lunch, go for lunch. But doing that in front of people is really, it's harder for the people who are struggling. Now, I recognize that's also, there's a tension there, isn't there? Because I think it's perfect. I think it's brilliant. It increases their creativity, their innovation. There's nothing wrong with what they did. It's just the visibility when people are in that mindset of, I've got so much on, I've got so much to do. Having people kind of sitting and laughing and joking around next to you and just taking their time to just chill and enjoy. It's very, very conflicting. And so I know there must be leaders in that situation. And what if people are in an office environment where there isn't anywhere to go? We're so lucky in Brighton, the beach, we've got tons of restaurants near us. You can go anywhere and enjoy yourself at lunchtime. And there's loads of places where people can't. And they're stuck, aren't they? They're like, actually they have to bring their lunch in. And, the only thing they can do at their lunch break is either go and sit in their car or walk around the block, which might not be a pretty location. And actually, there might be some tension there that's causing them to feel that they can't actually relax in that environment. And so they choose not to. I don't know. I'm just being honest, about our experience, because I remember it. And I remember thinking, this is not working for me. But my goodness, it goes against also what, the theory.
This is where we talk about team flow, isn't it? And what does that realistically mean? It means the team making decisions for the team, not for themselves. And that includes well-being for the team. So obviously there's been a lot of focus on mental health and well-being, quite rightly, but a lot of it has been with the lens of how do you help you?
Yes.
And not how, and maybe how do you help someone else, but not how do we as a team help each other long-term flourish, thrive, have those moments of play because they're really important, but when do we do it? And if someone else is off, and just the practicalities of running a business and achieving our objectives, because that's an important part of thriving and flourishing, that accomplishment that you get when you achieve stuff together. So it's having those continuous conversations and those moments to go, okay, so then the role of the leader, I suppose, I don't know, becomes more of an observation of environment and going, okay, let's bring everyone back together, or let's have that conversation, or let's have that difficult moment now so that we can talk about this and what works for us as a team, not necessarily for what works for you as an individual. I don't know. That's just me. As you were talking, I'm going, what would I do in those situations? And I guess that's the point, right? Leaders are not necessarily, and especially remote working now, you might have never experienced these scenarios. So you're never going to get it right 100% of the time. But I think it's the frequency of conversation, checking back in. Did I get that right? Hey team, how did that feel? What was that like? But that's tough. That's an idealistic culture, I think, and a place that we're trying to get to. It's probably quite a few steps of psychological safety and trust to get to that point with your team.
Absolutely. And I think, thank you, Alex, for sharing and being so vulnerable and sharing your own story and experience. But it really brings in that new culture of play and work, a new concept that we're not used to at work. So let's play hard and let's work hard. And also let's celebrate. Let's honestly take a moment, introspect, celebrate something we've achieved. And we don't do some of those things. So those are all new concepts for organizations to bring in. And I mean, I'm like, this is so exciting. Like, let's play,
It is, isn't it? And I think we've lost Kirsten again. But I think, yeah, she, what she's tapping into there around let's play, let's make things more fun is so critical right now. And, just looking back on my behavior, people know how I feel. I'm sure they could tell the vibe from me was like, oh my goodness. But, I look back and I think, well, we should have just had a conversation. Hey, Kirsten, you're back in the room.
Yes, sorry. I'm back in the room.
We're coming to the end of our time already. It's been a really full discussion. We've got just over a minute, and I'm keen to wrap up. I think we've covered so much here today, and I've really enjoyed this conversation. I feel like I've talked probably too much, but I've loved hearing from you, Kirsten, about the challenges that the leaders are facing in your part of the world. And always love hearing the fact that actually there's huge similarities. Universally as humans, there are things that transcend all the barriers and boundaries that exist. And I think it's refreshing to hear that actually all over the world, it is a good time to amplify and accelerate positive psychology as a foundation for how we work with organizations and help them flourish and thrive. I think it's good timing to have this conversation. I imagine with all the changes certainly going on in the UK this week, it seems there's been a huge shift, I think. Lots of people are back online from breaks and holidays and having kids in school again. And, it's a really interesting time. So I'm fascinated to know what we're going to be talking about next week. But I'll just say thank you so much, Kirsten, for joining us.
Thank you so much, Alex and Anthony, for having me. It was fun. I don't know where the time went.
Absolutely. And Ant as well. And we look forward to having some more guests as well. Get in touch if you're interested in joining us on our Friday live session. But we'll be back next Friday, 8:30 in the morning, GMT. And love to hear your questions or comments about what's going on all the way around the world in terms of humanizing work. So have a great Friday. Ant, I will speak to you shortly, I'm sure. So take care.
Sure.
Lovely.
Thanks, Kirsten. Thank you.